Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. What we're going to have a look at today is PSA grading and how that impacts the value of cards. Now, you could maybe use this sort of equation that I like to use when it comes to buying PSA cards. And I suppose the reason for this video, or what I wanted to look at, was a lot of people have been saying that because of the huge, and it's true, the huge amounts or increases in printing, and huge amounts of increase in graded cards ever since sort of that boom in 2020 means there's a lot more graded cards in the market. So a lot of people have been saying that the prices of modern graded cards are never going to be worth all that much because there's just too much on the market. There's just too much supply, too many PSA 10s, too many graded cards, and it's just going to lead to values never really going anywhere. So that's why I wanted to sort of explore this topic today. And there's no argument that there's been an increase in printing and there's been a huge increase in grading. Like, that's just where it's at. And I'm not going to go through the whole process of grading. I'm not going to insult people's intelligence. If you're very new to Pokemon investing, obviously you send your card off to get graded. There's heaps of companies that do it. Today I want to focus on PSA. They'll grade it 1 through 10. Obviously, the highest score, a 10, is the highest, which is a gem mint. The higher the score, the more mint condition or better or the best condition of the card. Like, it's not going to insult anyone else's intelligence with that, but that's sort of how it works. Now, I have sort of an equation that I like to use when it comes to looking at graded cards. And then with this equation, I want to give you 3 examples of how it comes into play. So, in my eyes, rarity plus popularity plus condition equals value. Rarity plus popularity plus condition equals value. And in fact, you could probably say rarity times popularity times condition equals value. So rarity, like overall, how much has the card been printed? Popularity, what's the demand on that card? How popular is the Pokemon? And condition, of course, what grade did it get? Those 3 things, I think, multiplied together will give you some sort of value. And like I was saying, I want to give you 3 examples of how that comes into play. Now, look, that's not a steadfast rule. There's always going to be intricacies that will break that rule, outliers. So don't take that as gospel, so to speak. Like I was saying, there's always going to be outliers. But let's jump into some examples of how this comes into play. And I don't want to call them rules. I more want to call them examples. So example 1, you cannot escape basic economics. So supply and demand. And here's the example I want to give. And it might almost sound like a stupid example, but let's take, I think this is the second most graded set in the history of the Pokemon TCG. Number 1, I'm pretty sure, is Evolutions. Maybe Hidden Fates is second. I didn't check it, but this is definitely either second or third, and it's Vivid Voltage. And I'm going to be stupid here. Let's pick the first card in the set, which is the Weedle. Okay? Now, if you look up the graded population on this card, there is 2 examples. Both 2 PSA grades have achieved a 10. So if we look at the equation, rarity times popularity times condition equals value, this has one of those 3 things. And if we were to almost score those values out of 10, okay, its condition is a 10. Like, there's only 2 examples and they're both a 10. You would have to rank that 10 out of 10 for just rarity. Like, think of some of the Gold Star cards, which I'm going to get through to in my third example. Think of some of the Gold Star cards. The lower the population, generally the higher the value. So this has a super low pop of PSA 10s. However, it isn't a rare card at all. They printed absolutely millions of this card. There is no rarity to it, and there is also 0 popularity. Unless there's some, I shouldn't say creepy or crazy, unless there's some sort of strange Weedle fan out there that absolutely loves this card, it has 0 popularity. So if we use that equation, rarity times popularity times condition equals value, even though the condition of this card is great, there's only 2 PSA 10s, there's no popularity and no rarity, so it has 0 value. Like, what are you going to buy a Vivid Voltage Weedle PSA 10 for? Geez, I wouldn't have thought it would be any more than $5. Like, and good luck finding someone that even wants to buy it. So that's one example I wanted to use of how, and I know it's a silly one, but I think what I'm getting at is the point of example one, or rule number one, it still cannot escape the basic principle of supply and demand. If there's no demand for something, it ain't going to be worth something. Like it's pretty straightforward. Now, I think the second example I wanted to use, and I don't know if you'd call this a rule, but it's definitely an example. There's a strong relationship that comes into factor in this sort of equation between PSA 9 copies and PSA 10 copies. And I wanted to use a bit of an outlier like this card. It's not the base set, it's Evolution's Charizard. Now, this has a massive PSA graded population. I don't even know how many of these cards have been graded. It would have to be in the tens of thousands. So, this XY Evolution's Charizard Holo has 32,000 PSA 10, PSA graded copies. Now, of that, only 400 odd have been graded a 10, and over 18,000 have been graded a 9. So what does it tell you? It probably tells you that there's pretty bad print quality from XY Evolutions. Maybe they just ramped the printers up and they wanted to smash so much of this product out here that it sort of got left behind in terms of quality control. But anyway, my point is with this example, if there's a massive difference between a PSA 9 population and a PSA 10 population, in this case 18,000 versus 400, you're going to see a bigger discrepancy between the value of the PSA 10 copy. Now, what's a 9 go for in a Charizard? I think maybe somewhere around 90 to 100 US dollars. Like, it doesn't really go for a great deal. What does a PSA 10 copy of this go for? I think it goes for maybe somewhere around, what does it go for? $1,400, $1,500, maybe $1,600, thereabouts. So anyway, there's something along the lines of like a 15 or 16 times extra value in the PSA 10 versus the PSA 9. Now compare this to something like the Alt Art Charizard from Brilliant Stars. There's actually more PSA 10 copies of this card. I think there's 6,000 odd PSA 10 copies and only maybe 3,800 or thereabouts PSA 9 copies. So there's actually more PSA 10s of this card. Now, if you look at the value of that in a 9 versus a 10, compare that to the XY Evolutions Charizard, and there's a big discrepancy in the value. So I'll put it up on the screen here. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll do a quick bit of research while this is being filmed, but a PSA 10 versus a PSA 9, what you'll notice is that it's not 18 times the difference. It might be 2 to 3 times the difference in an old art. So that's sort of the second example I wanted to give you. And relating that back to that equation, rarity times popularity times the condition equals the price, I guess this is sort of another example that comes into play there. Now, moving along, the third rule, I guess, or example I wanted to give is that whole rarity factor, and also the relationship between rarity and condition. And by condition, we're referring to what grade it got. And I wanted to use gold stars as an example. So let's wind all the way back to the EX era and have a look at the gold stars. And I wanted to give you sort of, let's go with 5 examples, 5 gold stars. Starting with probably the most popular, we're going to have a look at the Rayquaza. We'll have a look at the Charizard. We'll also have a look at the Gyarados from Holland Phantoms. We'll have a look at, I think this is the lowest pop. I'm sure it is the lowest pop gold star card, which is the Torchic. And we'll also have a look at the highest pop card, which is the Raikou. And now look, what happens in the gold star sort of space is the demand for them is all really strong. There's people that would love to complete a whole gold star set, whether it's all in PSA 9s, whether there's a couple of PSA 10s in and a heap of PSA 9s, or a whole PSA 10 set. They are a stunning set of Pokemon cards, and I can see why people want to do that. Now there's demand there. There's also going to be additional demand for the better artwork, the better looking cards, and also the popularity of the Pokemon. So that's why I wanted to start off with this card, the Gold Star Rayquaza, because arguably it commands the most value out of all the Gold Stars. I'm pretty sure the last time this card sold, it was somewhere around 40,000 US dollars, and it has a PSA 10 population of 48. So it's a super low pop, but it's not the lowest. And this is where this whole rarity times popularity times condition comes into play. And particularly in this scenario, we're looking at the popularity. So if we compare this again to the next Gold Star example that I wanted to give, which is the Charizard Gold Star, super popular, but also has a higher pop. So it has over twice the population of the Rayquaza. So it's at 98 versus 48. Now, current pricing, I think this generally goes for somewhere around 15 to 20,000 US. And if we had someone had a knife to my back and said a figure, it's probably somewhere around 18,000 US dollars. So you can sort of see that there are much lower pop cards than these, but because they're so popular, that adds to the value of them. Now, the third example I wanted to bring up is this absolute belter, which only I think has about 35 or 34 copies, which is the Gyarados PSA 10. Now, look, fan favorite Pokemon, but it's not as strong as the Rayquaza or the Charizard in terms of popularity, I wouldn't say, but ticks along in sales at about $11,000 US. So that's another one that sort of comes into play or emphasizes this example of rarity, I guess, coming into play, and also the condition on top of popularity, or how they coincide with popularity. Now, the fourth one I wanted to give, and this is a strong one, is the lowest pop Gold Star there is, which is the beautiful Torchic. Now, you can't argue that this is a popular Pokemon. Like, it's probably well known because it's it's Gen 3 now, yeah, Gen 3 Torchic. But like, it's not, it's not a Charizard, it's not an Umbreon, it's not a Mewtwo, it's not a Dragonite, it's not a Rayquaza, it's not a Lugia. Like, I wouldn't even say it's a B tier popularity, like, something like a, what are some B tier popularity Pokemon? Gengar, no, Gengar is probably an A tier popularity. Maybe Lucario, something like that. Sort of those B tier Pokemon that just tick along. But anyway, I wouldn't even call it that. It's almost like a C tier popularity Pokemon. But because of the rarity, because of its condition, such a low pop, it's really adding value to that card. And to emphasize this point even more, if we look at the highest pop PSA 10 card, which is the Raikou, what's it got? 380 or something PSA 10. This card only goes for about $900. You should be able to argue that this is a more popular Pokemon than the Torchic. And just to let you know, the Torchic, by the way, value-wise, I think that sort of sells maybe somewhere around 25,000 US. Like, how strong is that for I suppose you'd call it a baby Pokemon, like a starter to the evolution chain. So, it sort of drives home this whole point about this rarity and condition working in conjunction, even if it's not most popular. Like, the Gold Stars are popular, but that card isn't the most popular. So it's hard to know. And to swing right round the start of the video, this whole, modern cards are just graded absolutely into the ground and aren't going to be worth anything. Well, I guess we don't really know. And the other thing I was thinking about when it comes to this whole grading and, modern is it just going to continue to ramp up? Like, is grading just going to become more and more popular that, a modern PSA 10 alt art from the Sword and Shield era with 1,600 PSA 10 copies in 5 years' time is going to be deemed as low pop compared to, we might even be past Scarlet and Violet then. We might be up to, I don't know, I'm not going to think of two colours, but we might be onto something all new. And maybe, a standard pop then for a popular card is 20,000 PSA 10s, and only having 1,200 or 1,600 PSA 10 copies is deemed as low. I don't know, that's what I mean. You can't really predict the future. As long as popularity stays for these cards, I think they'll do okay. Are they ever going to go to the lofty heights that Gold Stars have gone to? if we work off this equation, rarity times popularity times condition, you could argue that they're supposed to be rare because they're a hit in the set, especially something like an old art, like that old art Charizard, maybe 2 to 3 booster boxes, you'll pull one. It's supposed to be rare, but because it's just been printed, they get printed so much these days, it sort of hurts its rarity a little bit. Super popular. And then condition, you could say, what are they? It's something like, there's a fairly strong population of PSA 10 old art Charizards. I think it's already up to 6,000. So working on that equation with modern, it doesn't quite stack up as strong as some of those obviously rare and vintage cards, particularly some of the prize cards and tournament cards. Like I'm going into the real top echelon cards now, just the demand, the popularity, etc. So hard to know. I didn't want to, this wasn't, I suppose, an advice topic around, this is exactly what's going to happen to modern, so take my advice, otherwise you'll miss out. It wasn't about that. It was about giving, I suppose, 3 examples based off this equation, and you can judge it how you will. I'd love to hear some thoughts in the comments below about what you do when it comes to looking at graded cards. How do you select them in terms of what you think might go up in value in the future? Would love to hear from you guys around that. Thanks heaps for watching. Ta.